As we approach Hydesville Day, we think of the pioneers who paved the way for us as spiritualists today. Certainly, when we look back into our history, a key moment occurred on March the 31st, 1848, and what followed centred around the Fox sisters. I'm joined today by Minister Suzanne Gibson-Foy, and Suzanne's going to take a look at the lives of the Fox sisters, the contribution that they made, and perhaps the price that they paid for being in the forefront of a new emerging religion. So let's go.
Thanks, Alv. I've called my talk today a couple of things, actually. I've called it the Fox Sisters, a few afterthoughts, or the Fox Sisters, the personal price. And I just really wanted to, rather than sort of going through a chronology of the lives of the girls, I just wanted to focus on various things that took my attention as I was reading about them. So the first thing I thought I would look at is the age of the girls concerned, because two of them were incredibly young at the time of the Hydesville rappings. And so the rappings, as we know, take place in 1848. The elder of the girls who was involved was called Leah. She was born in 1814, so she was around 34 at the time of the rappings. But interestingly, she wasn't actually present in the house on that day, on March the 31st. But obviously we know that she became a medium in her own right, as many of the family did. But she wasn't actually there when it happened. But she was an adult in her mid-30s. Now, the other two girls are much, much younger. There's a big age gap in the family. So Margaretta, or Maggie as she's sometimes called, was born in 1834. So she's around 14 at the time of the rappings. And Catherine, or Kate, the younger sister, was just 12. And so when these events took place in the spring of 1848, these two girls were incredibly young, 12 and 14, and their lives were going to be seriously transformed beyond anything that anyone could imagine. Now, after the events in the march, the girls actually lived separately for a while, but the raps seemed to follow all of them, and there were great demands on them to give sittings and to give demonstrations. And somebody had the idea with the raps of using the alphabet system. And by doing that, the girls were given this message. They were told, "Dear friends, you must proclaim this truth to the world. This is the dawning of a new era. You must not try to conceal it any longer. When you do your duty, God will protect you, and good spirits will watch over you." So secondly, I want to focus on the prolific amount of work that these ladies did. In November 1849, so about 18 months after those original happenings, Leah and Maggie did 3 nights at the Corinthian Hall in Rochester, literally performing to hundreds of people every night. From there, they went on and they did various stints in other cities, including Troy, New York, and Buffalo. In New York alone, they were there for several months over the summer. They did 3 seances a day for 2 hours each, with private sittings in between. So literally their seances ran into each other as they conducted private sittings or meetings in between. So these girls worked incredibly hard, and the circumstances in which they were working was difficult. They faced accusations of fraud, they faced lawsuits, they were tested, they were investigated, they were prodded, they were poked, they were questioned about their integrity, They were accused of using their joints to manufacture the sounds. And so these girls put themselves under, or were put under, an awful lot of strain. And Katie, slightly later when she was working, for one wealthy client alone, she did 400 sittings between 1861 and 1866. So over a 5-year period for one person, 400 sittings. That is an awful lot of work. And one questions how any medium can really cope with the amount of not just hours that they did demonstrations for, but the amount of scrutiny that they were under as they did it. Now, the girls did not work continually from 1848 until they passed. Maggie, who perhaps the least is documented about her mediumship, she stopped working once she married in 1857, and her husband did not like her mediumship at all. And after he died, she became a Roman Catholic and she gave up her mediumship for many, many years. Katie carried on working throughout the 60s and 70s. And we'll have a look at why she stopped in a moment. And Leah, who worked prolifically during the 1850s, her work became certainly lessened once she married in 1858. But the Fox sisters were well known for generally a very, very good standard of mediumship. All three ladies, Leah, Maggie and Kate, were mediums in their own right. And the work of Leah and Kate is particularly celebrated. Now, we know from the Hydesville rappings that their mediumship consisted of raps, that physical phenomena that comes. But their mediumship developed in other ways. It developed to include the movement of objects, the presence of spirit hands, spirit lights, direct writing, levitations, materialized hands, and occasionally full materializations of both objects and of people. Kate had lots of spontaneous phenomena that would happen around her home in normal daily activities. And Leah was described by Emma Harding Britton as the best test rapping and physical medium that she knew. And interestingly, Leah would not sit in the dark and she would not use a cabinet. Now, Katie came to London in 1871, and there she did all sorts of wonderful works. She gave a séance with D.D. Hume, and she was investigated by William Crookes. Her physician, on delivering her first child, which was a very difficult birth, he pronounced that he would never do another birthing with her, because in the birthing chamber there were many unseen hands at work and a fully materialized person in the room. So he was so spooked by the activities that was it as far as he was concerned. But despite the large number of sittings and demonstrations that were done, Leah came to the realization that the best results came when sitting with a small, harmonious group without the involvement of money. Kate apparently was also very affected by her environment, and the quality of her mediumship depended both on her environment and the type of people that she had in the audience present. So it's interesting that with both of those very talented mediums, it's recognized that a small harmonious audience tends to get the best results. And so the fourth area that I want to look at with the Fox sisters is criticisms made of them. And I'm not going to look at the accusations of fraud made against them, but rather I'm looking at Arthur Conan Doyle's comments on them. And of the two younger sisters, Maggie and Kate, he is particularly critical, as I said, not of their mediumship, that's not in question here, but of their character. And he bemoans that the girls did not recognize the religious significance of their work. And he claims that they trivialized their work by giving worldly advice, answering questions of a very material nature, receiving inappropriate sitters, and by answering comic or frivolous questions. And he also comments on their worldly gains from their work. He does, however, recognize that, of course, the girls, when this all started, were incredibly young, and they were thrust into the spotlight at a very young, impressionable age. How this must have affected them, we can only, from a very modern perspective, guess. But both those two young ladies struggled throughout their lives. They both had very heightened emotional states, and they both struggled with alcohol. And when we come to look towards what happened at the end of their lives, then you'll see very much how that affected them. Of Leah, Conan Doyle is far more complimentary, and he recognizes that she did understand and recognize the religious significance of her work, and that she became far more careful about who became her sitters and the number of sittings that she conducted. And even Emma Harding Britton, in her comments about Leah, notices that she was of noble heart. So Leah is seen to be quite upright in her work, whereas the two younger sisters perhaps seem to see their work in a more frivolous light. And certainly with Maggie, it never seems that she really understood how her mediumship worked, or how indeed the noises of the raps were made. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle, in his criticism of the two young ladies, offers this advice for any budding mediums. He advises that mediums should receive a salary, then they don't have to worry about getting money from individual demonstrations, and that will stop them pushing themselves to beyond their limits and into fatigue. He also suggests that mediums should be very careful of the choice of clients that they have and sitters that they have around them, and that they should also limit the number of sittings that they do. He did note that there doesn't seem to be any correlation between physical mediumship and having a good moral character. But he suggests that for mental mediumship, in order for that to work properly, a medium should be of a good moral character. Otherwise, they will not attract the right people to work with them. So some interesting points from Arthur that perhaps we can all take on board. So in this final section, I want to move on to what happened towards the end of their lives, because I think what happened we would consider today quite shocking. And I think at the time it was considered shocking as well. In the autumn of 1888, Maggie wrote an article for the New York Herald in which she denounced spiritualism. She then, soon after, carried out a series of public appearances in the States in which she demonstrated her raps, but she claimed that she produced them with her toes and that there was no spirit at work. And during her first demonstration, her sister Kate was with her, which suggests that Kate was colluding with what Maggie was doing. A year later, however, Maggie gave an interview to the New York Press in which she admitted that her denouncement was a lie and that the raps were indeed all true. And she said that she had made that denouncement because she had been offered money and she needed the money. And she also liked the excitement and the attention that went with it. Now, just before all of this happened in the late 1880s, there had been a falling out with the elder sister, Leah. And this was all to do with Kate and her use of alcohol. Kate was accused of being an unsound mother and of being abusive to her children, so she was arrested. And allegedly, this was either at Leah's instigation, or certainly Leah was part of it, and Leah was concerned over Kate's children. However, her children were not taken away from her, but there was a huge breach in the family then at this point. Leah died in 1890, just a couple of years later. Kate died in 1892 and Maggie in 1893. Leah was in her 70s, a good age. Kate and Maggie just in their 50s, and we are told that they died in a gloomy state. And so it does seem, I suppose, quite interesting that these three mediums kind of came to the fore. They hit the stage in the late 1840s with lots of drama, lots of interest, lots of newspaper stories being written about them. And then just before they die in 1888, 89, it all seems to happen again. There's a lot of drama, there's the denouncing of spiritualism, and then the retraction of the denouncing. And so it seems that they leave this world with a bit of drama as well. But I do wonder, if I go back to the titles that I was considering of this, price that was paid by all three ladies, but particularly those two young ones, the price that was paid for their mediumship, for their fame. They certainly did face great difficulties in their lives, and we can only hope that once they made it back to the spirit world, they were greeted with open arms, and the wonderful work that they did do while they were here was very much recognised and rewarded.
Suzanne, thank you for shining a light onto the lives of these three great pioneers of spiritualism. There is a lot of misinformation out there about the Fox sisters, so it's been good just to take a look at how their lives unfolded and the price that they paid for what they've given us today. As spiritualists, we owe it to our pioneers to understand our history, to understand where we come from. So it's been great to spend this small amount of time understanding a little more about the Fox sisters, particularly when we are approaching Hydesville Day, an important day in our calendar where we remember all that they've given to us. So thanks once more, Suzanne, and I hope those of you watching know a little bit more about the amazing lives of these pioneers. Thank you.